Disabled Hectorville man Eddie died in agonising pain 2 days after Christmas, waiting 10 hours for an ambulance.
Ambulances lined up like dominoes, leaving sick patients waiting for hours.
So, as Queensland's ambulance crisis ramps up, so too does pressure on the state government to fix the problem.
I was just trying to look after my mum, but she was just writhing in pain and so much pain, and then she just said, "I can't do it anymore," and she passed away in my arms.
She was in extreme pain. I did go over the speed limit. And you think, well, you know, people are going to end up in accidents.
Georgina Wild died alone, waiting for help. This message left on her answering machine.
Hi Georgina, it's Daniel from John Ambulance Call Centre here. Just calling to check in.
The night your chest starts hurting, you will dial 3 numbers and count on someone coming. In Victoria, that ambulance can bill you $1,396 and still might not reach you for hours because it is parked outside a full hospital. Your health is now a queue. People have died in that queue, on their own couches, in their daughter's arms. And the reason nobody is coming is not what you think. Both your governments have known it for a decade.
Daughter Ivanka took this photo of her mum. That's where she lay, on the floor, for 2 hours, in what ended up being a 28-hour nightmare just to get into hospital.
I think it's appalling. All of her left side was hurt.
22 hours. Maria Zukovic is 96. She fell at 5 in the morning on her way to the toilet, and the ambulance her daughter called 10 minutes later did not arrive until 3 the next morning. Then the ramping began. 3 hospitals, 28 hours from the floor to a bed. That word, ramping, is the polite name for an ambulance stuck in a queue outside a full emergency department, with a patient inside it and paramedics who cannot leave. It has become the busiest queue in the country. In the last financial year, more than 2.4 million Australians arrived at an emergency department in the back of an ambulance, a record, and the doctor's own report card says the call-outs have never been higher. In New South Wales alone, almost 200,000 people came through hospital doors by ambulance in a single quarter, the most ever recorded. A parliamentary inquiry sat doctors and paramedics down and asked what all that queuing actually does to the people inside the vans. Listen to what one emergency specialist told them.
There's a 10% increase in preventable mortality when more than 10% of patients in the emergency department have waited too long.
You can watch them deteriorate in front of your eyes just because you don't have any access to treatment for them.
The inquiry heard with an ageing population and increasing mental health issues.
Preventable mortality. That is a doctor's way of saying people who did not have to die. And the maths is not on your side, because researchers followed 213,000 Australians taken to hospital by ambulance with chest pain and found that once the wait outside the door passes 17 minutes, the chance of being dead within 30 days starts climbing. Past 28 minutes on the ramp, 1.57% of those patients were gone within a month, against 1.29 for the people wheeled straight in. Across 1 year of Victorian chest pain alone, that gap works out to around 70 deaths that the queue can claim. Hold that number, because it is about to get a face. Wayne Irving was 67, a Queensland grandfather with severe pain in his side, and his widow Barbara still cannot make the arithmetic work.
Not his heart. They tested him here, the paramedics tested him here, they put stuff on his chest to listen to his heart, and they said it's not cardiac, but it's severe. It's severe pain. So how does he have a cardiac arrest in an ambulance? Yeah, I don't understand.
But why, more to the point, why did it happen in an ambulance?
Wayne sat in the back of that ambulance outside Ipswich Hospital for around 3 hours. His daughter says paramedics escalated him 5 times and nothing moved. The bit that stings is what the official review found afterwards, in writing. There were no dedicated nurses or doctors overseeing the patients on the ramp, and staff had misread the procedure for giving strong pain relief to people stuck out there. The hospital failed a dying man on its own doorstep, and the review conceded the ramp itself was part of how. In Perth, the same story with a different name. Georgina Wild, 80, called 000 at 2:30 in the morning with chest pains, a priority 1, a 15-minute promise. The ambulance took 2.5 hours, and the call centre's welfare check went to her answering machine because she was already gone. And here is where you might switch off, because these are strangers, and you are healthy, and you do not call ambulances. So let me point it at you directly. Eddie, the man from the opening headline, was 54. Wayne left the house with a pain in his side, not a heart condition. Nobody in this story thought they were the kind of person who dies in a queue. The queue does not check who you are. It checks whether a bed is free, and right now, listen to how the president of Queensland's top doctors group describes what is waiting for you behind those doors.
A band-aid on their scratch. They've got broken legs, chest pains, bowel sepsis, which they could die from. They're seriously unwell, and there's no beds in the hospital, and there's no beds left in the accident emergencies, and on the trolleys, on the verandas, in the hallways. We have underbuilt hospitals, and we've got underfunded health system.
Underbuilt and underfunded is not a slogan, it is a scoreboard, and every state is on it. In Western Australia this July, ambulances spent 5,924 hours parked outside hospitals, the worst month of the year, an average of 191 hours of waiting every single day. The Premier there, Roger Cook, once called 1,030 hours a massive failure and a crisis, back when he was in opposition. His state now runs at nearly 6 times that, and each of those hours has a person inside it. A Georgina on a couch, a Wayne in a van. South. Australia lost 52,000 hours to the ramp last year, close to 6 years of human waiting in one state in 1 year. Queensland ramped for roughly 157,000 hours in a single year, up 149% in 5. And this past December, 4 in every 10 patients arriving by ambulance still waited beyond the half-hour mark. And when the vans stop coming, families do what Susie Kozel did.
You're in desperation, do you know what I mean, trying to get help.
With significant ambulance delays, Susie Kozel says their local hospital advised her to drive her dad to the Royal Melbourne.
It's heartbreaking. I just did what I had to do. I just didn't want to wait.
A hospital told a daughter to load her father into the family car while he was having a stroke, because the ambulances were ramped and the service had declared a code red. That night in Melbourne, 70 000 cases sat pending with no van to send. Jodie Torpy, 27, chest pain and dizziness, got a call back an hour and a half later to check whether she was still alive. And the union that represents paramedics says something worse is happening now, quietly. People have started not calling out of fear of clogging a clogged system, and the crews are arriving at jobs to be told, "You probably should have called an hour ago." When ordinary Australians start rationing 000 for themselves, the service has already failed, whatever the ministers say at the press conference. Here is where it gets worse, because the man who runs the Doctors Association has a blunt diagnosis for why none of this moves.
Essentially full up. So your emergency departments can't get the people up into the wards. So they're full up. So if I could put it in simple terms, our hospitals are dangerously constipated. So what we need to do is actually build capacity within the hospitals.
Full at the front door, full in the corridors, full in the wards above. The national numbers say he is not exaggerating. 9.1 million presentations to public emergency departments last year, and only 53% of those people were in and out within 4 hours, down from 67% 5 years ago. For the sick ones, the ones who actually need admission, 1 in 10 spent nearly 19 hours in emergency before the system found them a bed, 6 hours longer than it took at the start of this decade. 19 hours is not a wait. It is a night and a day on a trolley under fluorescent light, and it is mostly older Australians doing it. Ask David Hughes what that looks like when it is your own mother.
She's a lady, 79 years old, on her own, that she's on a trolley in a hallway with 5 other beds around, people lined up like cattle around her.
Doctors suspect she'd suffered a stroke.
Over 3.5 hours later before I was even able to get her into a bed. So just really upset with the state of our health system.
People lined up like cattle. A 79-year-old stroke patient in a hallway, and the ambulances backed up outside her, and response times deteriorating in almost every state on the Productivity Commission's own ledger. So the obvious question is the one the whole system cannot answer at a press conference. If the ambulances exist and the paramedics exist, and you are paying for all of it, why is there never a bed? The answer is the part of this story nobody puts in the headline. The bed your ambulance is queuing for is not empty because somebody sicker got it. Very often, it is not empty because the person in it was cleared to leave weeks ago and has nowhere to go. In the New South Wales inquiry, one submission described a patient who had been sitting in a ward for 125 days, not because they were sick, but because they were waiting for an aged care bed that never came up. A senior emergency nurse told the same inquiry her department ramps ambulances because on most days, 30 admitted patients, mostly elderly, are waiting 24 to 30 hours for a ward bed in a hospital with 22 acute beds. She described an elderly woman with dementia who waited more than 120 hours, 5 days, for a medical bed, while 40 of her 150 nursing colleagues walked away from the job in 6 months. Doctors call it exit block, and the scale of it is the scandal. The Australian Medical Association counted a record 19,631 people stranded in hospital beds in a single year because there was no aged care place or disability support to discharge them into, and together they burned through 286,000 bed days. Right now, roughly 1 in 5 acute hospital beds is occupied by somebody who is only there because the aged care system has no room for them. 1 in 5. That is the queue behind your queue, and every one of those beds is a ramped ambulance somewhere below with someone's mother inside it. And it is getting worse, fast. In New South Wales alone, about 3,300 older patients are stuck in hospital right now, waiting for an aged care place, a number that jumped 35% in 6 months. Outside the hospital walls, the average wait for a home care package blew out to 245 days last year, double the year before, and 162 days for a residential place. The states begged the Commonwealth for $2 billion specifically to move stranded patients out of hospital beds and into care. When the hospital funding agreement was signed, that money was not in it. And if you are listening to all of this as somebody else's misfortune, here is the part that should change how you hear it. The chain runs in one direction, and you are at the end of it. Canberra underfunds aged care, so your mother cannot leave the ward. So the ward cannot take the patient from emergency. So emergency cannot take the patient from the ambulance. So the ambulance cannot come to your house. The night you clutch your chest at 2:30 in the morning, like Georgina did, you will be counting on a system where every single link is already spoken for. That is not bad luck. That is a design. Nowhere is the gap between the promise and the queue wider than South Australia. Peter Malinauskas won government on 2 words: fix ramping. Then a 54-year-old man in Hectorville, assessed as needing help within 60 minutes, waited 10 hours and died before the ambulance arrived. And the official review found that in the 48 hours around his call, ambulances were ramped outside Adelaide's hospitals for 416 hours. The year after that review, South Australians went on to set an all-time record anyway. More than 48,000 hours lost on the ramp before December had even finished. The Doctors' Association called it a year that cannot be celebrated. The Premier's office, meanwhile, now issues press releases about improvement when a month comes in at 3,750 hours, with barely 2/3 of urgent cases reached on time. That is where the bar now sits. Tasmania held a full parliamentary inquiry after Kathleen Schramm, 80, died in her daughter's arms while ramped at the Royal Hobart, and after the coroner examined Anne Pedlar's death following 8 hours ramped at Launceston. The coroner's written warning was that cases like this one will continue to occur. The inquiry's finding was blunter still. Ramping is the result of whole-of-health system failures. In New South Wales, a woman losing her pregnancy wrote her inquiry submission from a chair in a makeshift room at the John Hunter, 11.5 hours after she arrived, with 9 ambulances banked up outside. These are not leaks. They are public documents tabled in your parliaments, and the queue kept growing after every one of them. This is not last decade's problem, it is this winter's. In February, Western Australia set a new record for the month at 4,892 ramped hours, and by July it was nearly 6,000. In Queensland this past December, 4 in every 10 ambulance patients were still stuck past the 30-minute line, and in the July peak it was close to 1 in 2. The state has not hit its own transfer target in nearly a decade. Whatever your postcode, the pattern is the same. The records keep breaking in the same direction. Best case, the money finally lands where the blockage is. The latest federal budget put $1.7 billion toward 5,000 new aged care beds a year. And if those beds actually open, the wards drain, the ramps shorten, and the maths from that chest pain study starts working for you instead of against you. Realistic case, the beds arrive slower than the aging population does. The winters keep setting records the way this one already has, and the queue simply becomes the accepted price of getting old here. Worst case, the night the system is at its July peak is the night your own emergency happens, and you become the case study in somebody else's inquiry. Priority 1, 15-minute promise, help that comes when it comes. First, find out this week whether you are actually covered for an ambulance. In Victoria, the uncovered bill starts around $1,400 in the city and over $2,000 in the regions, and membership costs less than a tank of fuel. So check your fund or join, because a bill should never be the reason you hesitate. Second, if you hold a pension or healthcare card, you are likely covered already in most states, but confirm it tonight in writing, because assuming is how people end up on the hook for a 4-figure invoice. Third, if you or someone near you has chest pain, call 000 anyway, every time. The union says people have started self-rationing the service, and that choice kills faster than any queue. If the condition worsens while you wait, call back immediately and say the words, "The patient is deteriorating," because deterioration is what forces an upgrade. Fourth, put a one-page sheet by the phone of the older person in your life, their medications, conditions, and doctor, because in a delayed response, the first minutes of information are the ones that decide the triage code. Fifth, check on the person who lives alone. Georgina died on her couch with the television on and the front door unlocked. A knock at the right hour is the one part of this system you personally control. Because here is the truth the press conferences will not say plainly. This was never bad luck. Your governments, state and federal, spent a decade arguing over a funding split while the doctors' reports, the coroner's warnings and the parliamentary inquiries piled up. And they signed a hospital deal that left the $2 billion exit fix on the table. The queue outside the hospital is the invoice for that decade, and it gets handed to whoever collapses next. Maria paid it on the floor. Wayne paid it in a van. Kathleen paid it in her daughter's arms. So tell me below, have you or someone you love been left waiting for an ambulance? How long was it, and which hospital? Because the comments under videos like this are becoming the record the official numbers keep missing.